Hello there. Welcome into a Monday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you've chosen to listen on your radio, online at extrasports1300.com, or you're listening on the new Extra Sports 1300 app, sponsored, of course, by Diversus Health, mental health and well-being for all. A veritable cornucopia of sports topics, mostly pertaining to the Denver Broncos, coming your way over the course of the program. And I'd love to get your thoughts. 719-247-1313 is both the phone and the text line for your convenience. So I don't know if you've been counting, but it had been 1,742 days since the Denver Broncos have beaten the Raiders. And watching that game yesterday, perhaps for the first time in 1,742 days, the Denver Broncos are kind of fun. You know, last year they ended the losing streak against the Chiefs, and you can't have one of those hanging over you, right? A team in your own division dominating you for years and years and years. You can't have that. So it was good that the Denver Broncos were able to end that losing streak, and perhaps it's the combination of both last year ending the losing streak to Kansas City and beating the Raiders yesterday. But when it comes to beating the Chiefs, I think it's a relief to the Denver Broncos, to the fan base, but it doesn't change much, right? That, like, there's still a recognition that the Chiefs are kind of on a different level right now than the Denver Broncos, but the Raiders. Not only would I say that the roots of the Raider-Bronco rivalry run deeper than the Chiefs-Broncos rivalry, I think that the Raiders rivalry means more. But the Raiders are supposed to be at about the same level as the Denver Broncos, right? For most of the last 4 years, you would clump those two teams together. But yet, for the last 8 meetings, the Raiders beat the Denver Broncos. So, in effect, the Broncos weren't on the Raiders level. And if they're not on the Raiders level and they weren't on the Chiefs level, can you say they're on the Chargers level? Because routinely the Chargers, save for last year when they lost Justin Herbert for half the season, finish routinely ahead of the Denver Broncos. So if you can't say that you're better than the Raiders, then really what can you say definitively about this football team? And I think it was more than relief yesterday for the Broncos to beat the Raiders. And by the way, they didn't just beat them, they beat them down. Right? This was on a last-second field goal by Will Lutz. Like, the margin was not close. And I think that added to it a little bit. It was just a legitimate butt-kicking of your most bitter rival that you just so happen to have not beaten in the last 8 meetings. So I think it feels different. Thinking back, it was only about a year ago with the Chiefs. This feels different. This feels like something is going on with the Denver Broncos, that they're heading in the right direction, and they're fun. I mean, whether you were there yesterday or you heard it through the television, the Raiders suck chants that were raining down at the end of that game, think that's what they were saying. Maybe it was even worse than that. But just like, it was fun. Everything about yesterday seemed fun. right? Putting 2 players into the Ring of Fame, DeMarcus Ware, Champ Bailey being there, the uniforms, everything. It looked like it was a lot of fun at Empower Field. And let's be honest, there hasn't been a lot of those days over the past few years. Even the success that the Broncos would have winning a game, it would feel like work. It would feel laborious. And it didn't give you the feeling that, again, something is going on with this football team. And to the point of there might be something going on with this football team, I think back to the Denver Nuggets in the 2016-17 season. That was the year. Coincidentally, it was Michael Malone's second year, as it's Sean Payton's second year in Denver. Coming off of just horrendous years under Brian Shaw. And even the first year under Michael Malone wasn't great. They only won 33 games. But even in a season that ultimately ended with the Nuggets finishing 10 games under 500, it felt like there was something going on. Like they were heading in the right direction, that the next year it would be okay to actually think that the Nuggets could accomplish something. And they accomplished a great deal, falling just short of the playoffs in game 82 against Minnesota. Maybe that's the track that the Denver Broncos are on. Maybe they're building. Nikola Jokic that year turned into a star. Right? People around the league were noticing what Nikola Jokic did that year. He didn't win the MVP, but he was being discussed. And like, oh, Nuggets got something here. Of course, still nobody knew that Nikola Jokic would turn into basically a generational player. 1 title, 3 MVPs in 4 years. You don't see that very often. So still, there was a ways to go for Nikola Jokic to become what he is today. But you saw like they have something in him. Maybe the Nuggets have found their next star. And I look at Pat Surtain that way. And I'll get more into him later, but the conversation about him is different than it has been in years past. So they have a star in Pat Surtain. And then on both teams, you have these rookies that a lot of what they can be rides on those guys. It was Jamal Murray for the Denver Nuggets. It's Bo Nix, obviously, for the Denver Broncos. If they're ever going to accomplish anything, Jamal Murray had to hit, and Bo Nix has to hit. I don't think either one, Bo Nix hasn't yet, and Jamal Murray didn't, but he was ascending. Right? He was improving throughout that season. They even, and not that this has much anything to do with it, it's just a fun little thing. Remember they opened that year wearing the rainbow skylines? Like that, I shouldn't say it's beside the point or anything like that, because I do think it's significant, because that was a look that many diehard Nuggets fans desperately wanted the team to embrace again. And they wore them for the first time in I don't know how long on opening night, just as the Broncos wore those throwbacks that everybody loves so much yesterday. And it gets people excited, and it gets people feeling nostalgic and just feeling good. And then the performance backed it up. But more than anything else in that year for the Denver Nuggets, they found their identity. Now, they had made that pivotal switch to kind of go away from Jusuf Nurkic to Nikola Jokic the season prior. But that was when you started to really see through the course of an 82-game season that the Nuggets had an identity. Right? And that's such an important step as a team is trying to rebuild, is finding out who they are. What do we do well? Who are we? How are we going to win games? You see the identity right now of the Denver Broncos. The identity is Pat Surtain in the defense. Just like it was Nikola Jokic in the offense back then with the Denver Nuggets. And then, of course, Michael Malone kept working and trying to get this team to play the level of defense they needed to advance far in the playoffs. And that's Sean Payton's task on the other side of the football, is getting the Broncos offense to operate at a level to be a playoff team or to advance in the postseason. But the Broncos right now, their identity is their defense, led by Pat Surtain. That right now is one of the best in the NFL. The pass rush, the big plays by Surtain, locking down opposing, that's who they are. And then on the other side of the football, they're still trying to find their way, but it seems to be heavily rooted in the run game. On Fox yesterday, they were talking about a conversation they had with Vance Joseph. And how Vance Joseph, after the Miami game, that 70-20 loss last year in week 3, said that he was trying to blend styles. Right? He was trying to take what Fangio had done and been somewhat successful with a lot of the personnel, Justin Simmons, Pat Surtain, like those guys, while merging it with what he likes to do. Well, that's not an identity. That's an identity crisis. What are we? Are we this shell, too high safety, bend but don't break defense? Or are we the defense that goes after people? And Vance Joseph was trying to have his foot in both camps, and it just didn't work. And after that game against Miami, he's like, you know what? I'm doing my thing. As much as he'll say he's crafting the defense to the strengths of his personnel, it's his system, and they're bringing in people that fit his system. And they're becoming more aggressive, and they're bringing the blitz routinely. And it's this no-name hunt and packs type defense. And you saw last year, just as when the Nuggets kind of devalued Jusuf Nurkic and elevated Nikola Jokic and made him more of a focal point, you started to see some of the signs the year prior. And then the 2016-17 season, it was like, oh, they have something. Last year, the defense was a big reason they won any games after that Miami game. Right? But a lot, the season kind of felt lost at that point, and it was just, they went on that nice run and they gave you a little bit of hope, and then Christmas Eve happened with the Patriots and that all went away. And now you're seeing it from week 1. Right away, you're seeing Vance Joseph's defense. And they've been playing great. They continue to be the best thing about this football team right now. That's their identity. Now, to really get where they want to go, the other side of the football has got to improve. The other side of the football has got to pick up. from where it has been for most of these 5 games. But you can, for the first time in a few years, you can actually like see the plan. And it's bearing some fruit with a pretty significant win yesterday. Now, again, that 2016-17 Nuggets team did not even come close to the playoffs. In fact, they weren't in the postseason till 2 years after that. This is not me saying purchase your playoff tickets now. Okay, certainly beating the Las Vegas Raiders is not going to send shockwaves throughout the league that the Broncos are back, nor should it. It was a significant win for you, for the Bronco fan base, for the Bronco franchise. There are other wins that they got to get, and a lot of them between now and the end of the season to change the conversation in that regard. But like that 2016-17 Nuggets team, some people were kind of noticing, but not really. It was more here locally. We're like, there might be something here. I think there are parallels. I think there are similarities. But yesterday was significant. Take your thoughts on it. 719-247. 1313. Speaking of that star that plays for the Denver Broncos, Pat Surtain, talk about him and could a certain postseason award be in his future this season? Attention, football fans. It's time to report for game day, which is today at Hooters of Colorado Springs with craveable wings, ice cold beer, plenty of big screen TVs, and the world famous Hooters girls. It's the number one franchise in the league. Tonight, grab a Big Daddy, a Bud Light, or Michelob Ultra for just $5.19. Get into Hooters of Colorado Springs for all the football action. New Orleans and Kansas City tonight to close out an interesting week, to say the least, weekend. The Broncos, I think, have their first star player since Von Miller in Pat Surtain. And that may not be an earth-shattering statement to you. And it may be quite obvious, given that you've been watching him since he came into the league. But you're recognizing the talent. The thing about stardom is it has to be widely recognized. You don't become a star just in your backyard, right? To really become a star in any league, you have to be widely recognized as such, right? And going back to my comparison between Surtain and Jokic in terms of each of those Denver teams having their next star, that's what Nuggets fans have been fighting for years with Nikola Jokic, is understand how good he is and give him his flowers. And I think there's been a similar push from Broncos fans. But the problem is, right, the Broncos have been largely irrelevant in Pat Surtain's time. So they're not going to be a team discussed on television, on talk radio, at least outside of here. And I think people understood that Pat Surtain's talented and could certainly but the guy wasn't even an all-pro last year. Right? To say nothing of him being the best at what he does. That conversation has changed. And again, I point you to the Fox broadcast yesterday. The graphic they put up about what he's doing against other teams' number one receivers. They kept calling him a superstar. The conversation around Pat Surtain has changed. And it's plays like this that help take someone from being just a very good player that everybody knows is talented into a star.
Minshew with a play fake, rolling to his left. Now floats one too high. It's going to be intercepted at the goal line. Down the west sideline, intercepted. This is Pat Surtain. Surtain's going to house call it. 25-20, 15-10, 5 touchdown. And the Broncos on a 100-yard interception return for a touchdown are 1 point away from tying this game.
KOA on the call. It sounded like Dave Logan ran out of some steam there at the end of Pat Surtain's run. Thankfully, Surtain did not, and he took it 100 yards for a touchdown, and it completely swung the game. Completely changed the game because you're watching, and I'm like, well, the score really should be this in favor of the Raiders, even when the Broncos get up to 20 points. Well, without that, it would still. So it completely changed the game, and Pat Surtain said they even felt it down on the field.
We felt like we needed that momentum moving forward. Obviously, we was in a situation where we had to capitalize on the opportunities we could get, and that situation there, I had to capitalize on that moment and make a play. And I could just feel the momentum shift. You could tell by the team that that playing so far moving forward. We really, really felt the tempo, felt the urgency to really up the energy and up the play for real. So,
and then of course he would add another interception, not a pick six, slacker, but another interception to basically salt the game away later. And Zach Allen, after the game, said that he should be Defensive Player of the Year. And as you know, that is a very difficult award for a corner to win. The last one was Stephon Gilmore for the Patriots in 2019. The last corner before him was Charles Woodson in 2009. In fact, since the turn of the century, since the year 2000, that's it. That's the list. Woodson, Gilmore. Now, there have been safeties. Bob Sanders, Troy Polamalu, Ed Reed. But we know that safeties, even though it feels like the safeties are the furthest back, those kind of safeties got a little bit more involved in things up near the line of scrimmage, right? Stopping the run. Maybe they go on a random blitz here and there. You can't get further away from the action than a corner. Really, on a play-by-play basis, there's no position on the defensive side that's further away from the action than a corner. So that's why it's extremely difficult for a corner, and they could be avoided, right? Not only are you far away, you could be completely avoided. Everyone else that has won Defensive Player of the Year is in the front seven. Defensive end, linebacker, all of them. But you have Pat Surtain, who swings the game with that play. That's what you need. Right? You need somebody. It's a little like Travis Hunter. I know he has the other side of the football, but the conversation around him being the Heisman is, even though he plays corner, to say nothing of what he does offensively, he still impacts the game. It's not just that he plays both. He impacts games at a high level on both sides of the football, including on the defense. So you need plays like that from Pat Surtain to swing games for people to take him seriously as a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. So he should be discussed right now. The run he's on with these other teams' number one receivers, what he did yesterday, he should be in that conversation. Absolutely. But does he have staying power? That's going to be the difficult part of this. They got to keep throwing at him. Even though it seems like the dumbest thing you can do against the Denver Broncos is throw it in number two's direction, that has to keep happening. Because if it doesn't, then this isn't going to work. Then he's not going to maintain his candidacy. The hope you have in that, though, is if he continues, and yesterday was kind of a weird day. Without Devontae Adams, there wasn't really one clear receiver. They weren't going to put him on Bowers, which early on was a mistake. And they didn't even have him shadow Myers a lot yesterday. He's just kind of on his side is what it felt like. But if he keeps following the other team's number one receiver, teams are going to keep throwing at him. Not a ton, but they're going to look in that direction because they have to. I mean, what team is going to voluntarily say, all right, our number one receiver, just because Surtain's on him, we're not going to throw it his way ever? You can't do that. You already lose if you're willing to just take your best receiver out of the game plan because you know he's going to be covered by Pat Surtain. The common thread that I noticed between Charles Woodson and Stephon Gilmore, and this will not surprise you, If Surtain is going to really win this thing, he's got to lead the league in interceptions. Gilmore did it. Woodson was tied for the league lead. Right now, Surtain is in a massive tie for third. There's like 10 dudes who all have 3 interceptions. So he's going to have to move up that list. I don't see how he can win Defensive Player of the Year if he's not at the top of the leaderboard when it comes to interceptions. Then you look at Gilmore. He was the best player on the best defense in the league. Patriots allowed the fewest yards that season in 2019. Broncos right now are third. Now, they're behind the Jets and they're behind the Titans. I don't expect the Titans to keep up. They were on a bye week. That helped. But they're going to have to be up there. And they might even need to be number 1. The margin for error here is going to be extremely thin. You got to have, and here's the most obvious, Broncos got to keep winning. Not continuing their winning streak, but they have to stay relevant throughout the year. They can't turn this winning streak into a 3-game losing streak. Because then no one's talking about them again. And people are going to move on. So you got to get all of that. And you still have to contend with the fact that TJ Watt exists. Because right now, I would put Surtain and Watt right at the top. So it will be very difficult for Surtain to remain in this conversation. But there are some things there that if you're a Broncos fan, it gives you hope that he has some staying power. And I circled the date. It's December 29th. If Pat Surtain can get to December 29th, if the Broncos can win enough between now and December 29th, Surtain do a lot of these same things between now and December 29th. The penultimate week of the season, the Broncos play the Bengals. If that game has significance, maybe even to the point where it's flexed, and it's Surtain versus Chase, because here's the problem. A lot of the best receivers Surtain has already faced that are on his schedule. It doesn't seem like he's going to cover Kelsey. The next one, and it would be his biggest test, to be honest, unless Davante Adams somehow drops into one of the teams that the Broncos have on their schedule. That's not the Raiders. Between now and then, it'll be Surtain versus Chase. And if Surtain holds him down, that could give it to him. But a lot has to go right. A lot has to go right. But right now, 5 weeks in, give me 3 guys that should be considered over Pat Surtain right now. Give me 2. I think it's Watt and him right now. But even if he doesn't win the Defensive Player of the Year, Pat Surtain is reaching stardom in the NFL. He's not just a really good player. Like, he's becoming one of the top players that is discussed on these broadcasts. He's being talked about more than he had been in previous years. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, there is a Raiders side to yesterday. And I want to get into that along with, obviously, some updated reports on the fate of Davante Adams and an interesting conversation between the owner of the Raiders and a certain college quarterback. 719-247-1313 is the number. You want to give your thoughts on Broncos Raiders. Talk about that dust up between coach and quarterback at the top of the hour. Couple of your thoughts on this Monday. From the 719, the reason Dave Logan ran out of excitement on his call of the Pat Surtain pick six is that he knew there was a severe hold on the quarterback that was not a touchdown. We all thought it was going to be called back. I gotta say, I'll side with Daryl Johnston. I think that they were right to pick up the flag. But perhaps the fact that a flag was thrown was what caused the change in tone from Dave Logan. I think they were right to pick up the flag. I'm with Daryl Johnston on that aspect. But yeah, certainly the flag minded because I thought it was going to get called back. My flag, of course. It's almost to the point that I expect it. For the fact that there are no flags thrown on the play, that's really what's not normal. On Pat Surtain, Steve G said, I remember when Surtain was drafted, there were so many boo birds, a lot of uneducated fans. Now you see how great he is. Now, dedicated listeners to the show will understand and remember, of course you do, that I was not the biggest fan of the Denver Broncos drafting Pat Surtain. But I said it at the time, and I'll say it again now. It is not about how good or not good Pat Surtain is. The Denver Broncos had a chance to take a quarterback that I thought had the ability to be a franchise guy. And that's what this organization needed more. I'm not the biggest, best player available. Teams have needs in the draft. That was the reason why I didn't love the Broncos drafting Pat Surtain. But let's not misremember here. The reason Pat Surtain was drafted was so he could be shipped to the Green Bay Packers for Aaron Rodgers. They were drafting him for Green Bay. So, to an extent, George Payton was doing what I thought he needed to do going into the draft. He was just trying to land Aaron Rodgers, and I was a proponent of them drafting Justin Fields. Neither one of us were successful in our endeavors or our hopes and wants. But forget if the Denver Broncos, the alternative history, if they had Aaron Rodgers and never had Bo Nix. Now it's getting to the point, imagine if they had Aaron Rodgers and not Pat Surtain. What would it look like? Because he was going to go to Green Bay. And then the deal fell through. I thought Pat Surtain was going to be a terrific corner. It's just that wasn't going to help the Broncos win football games. And guess what? For the large majority of his time in Denver, it hasn't. There is a Raiders side to yesterday's game, and it is that the everything's just going to where. It's not good. First of all, They replace Gardner Minshew with Aiden O'Connell. That was the Raiders waving the white flag in that football game. That was it. No matter what you thought about how the game was going, once the Raiders brought in Aiden O'Connell, you had to say to yourself, that's over. It's over. Broncos are winning this game. Because that's how I felt. I think that's how Sean Payton felt. Because he finally let Bo Nix throw the ball after that. Again, we'll get into that at the top of the hour. So now Antonio Pierce doesn't know what he's going to do at quarterback. Although if you take in some of his quotes from today, quote, it's all about the football. You've got to protect the football. The easiest way to lose the game is turnovers. And I've seen enough of Aiden last year, the spring, to know what to expect from Aiden. Those two quotes are connected. Sure looks like Aiden O'Connell's time has come again. And who knows? They might switch back to Gardner Minshew in 2 weeks. It is a mess. To say nothing of what's happening with Davante Adams. At least the one thing that the Raiders got straightened out was whether Max Crosby was looking to maybe pull a Davante. I think we can enter that into the vernacular. Max Crosby, after the game, wanting to set the record straight about his situation with the Raiders, and some reports that came up courtesy of Michael Lombardi when he was on the Pat McAfee show.
Don't speak about me when you don't know what's going on. You're speaking for me, you know what I mean? Or speaking about the organization. Oh, something must be going on with Matt. Come on, bro. You know where I want to be. You think I want to be anywhere else? No. I got the tatted on my body. I don't want to go anywhere. So at the end of the day, it's just funny. You know, you got a lot of people that have a lot to say when they really don't know what's going on.
What the Raiders need to do, because I wouldn't say that Davante Adams was as forceful in the past as Max Crosby was there. The Raiders cannot afford to see Max Crosby go the way of Davante Adams. And he can say all he wants about the tattoo and where he wants to be. Every year that goes by and Max Crosby's toiling at the bottom of the AFC West, if yesterday was a sign of things to come in terms of where the Broncos are going and where the Raiders are going, the Raiders can't allow Max Crosby to grow fed up with his situation like Davante Adams. Yes, it will take longer. It will take more. But I'm telling you, Max Crosby is not going to stay on the Vegas Raiders to be in last place for the rest of his career. I don't care how cool he thinks it is that he plays for the Raiders and how well he fits the whole Raiders aura. He will grow tired of losing. The Raiders cannot risk that. Davante Adams, and I've been saying this for a couple years now, the Raiders have reasons for moving on from Davante Adams. Okay, and the Raiders can still have a brighter future without him. Without Max Crosby, forget it. They have to do the right thing. And I think Mark Davis knows what that is. And that is why Mark Davis made the comment to Shedeur Sanders at the Las Vegas Aces game the other night, you may already be home. I've watched all of your games. Look at that football team. They're not that different than where the Broncos were a few years ago. You have Max Crosby. You have Brock Bowers. you have some pieces on that football team. They are not as devoid of talent as a New England or a Carolina are. There's more in that cupboard. Drafting a quarterback like Shedeur Sanders would change everything for them. Now, they need to fire Luke Getsy before they draft Shedeur. There are other things they have to do. And I'm not saying they're a quarterback away from competing for a Super Bowl. But they have a tackle in Colton Miller. They have one of the best defensive players in the league in Max Crosby. They have decent wide receivers, even outside of Devontae Adams. They have an absolute stud in Brock Bowers. Vegas is a much better situation for Shedeur than Carolina. And what's interesting about all of this, because if this were to happen, if it would have been Quinn Ewers or Carson Beck or Jaden Milroe that Mark Davis would have said those things to, it would be like, just, okay. Like he's just making a comment. But with Shedeur, it feels different because of what his father has said in the past. I don't know if the Raiders are going to end up with the number 1 pick. And I still think that if they're 2, they might be okay. Maybe even 3 if somebody like Milroe bounces back after the Vanderbilt game and gets back on track as maybe being in that conversation for QB1 in this draft. But if the Raiders are like 5, 6, 7, they're either going to have to move up or Shedeur's going to have to pull an Eli. And that idea has already been discussed publicly. I think Mark Davis knows. And it would make a big difference. 719-247-1313. By the way, some stuff out on Devontae Adams. Jordan Schultz tweeted today, teams interested in trading for Adams have told him it's unrealistic for the Raiders to expect a second rounder while also having the acquiring team take on his full 2024 salary. Translated, this thing may not be done this week either. And if I'm the Raiders after yesterday, why do you need to expedite this? Why? What are you trying to save here? Oh, we got to get him out of the building, set our team up for a better path. Like that's gone now. Hold out, see what you can get. Because it doesn't look like the Raiders are playing for much else this season. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, what about that little tiff on the sideline between Sean Payton and Bo Nix? Welcome in Drive Time Sports on a Monday. Appreciate you tuning in and would encourage you to watch the show live on a daily basis. You can do so on our social media platforms, whether it's Facebook, X, Instagram, or YouTube. The handle would be all the same, at XTRA Sports 1300. If you follow me on any of those platforms, you can also watch the show. Broncos beat the Raiders for the first time in more than 1,700 days. But along with that, and I do think that's the biggest headline here. But what happened between Sean Payton and Bo Nix on the sideline is also a big story. I said late last week that given who the Denver Broncos were going against, it would be reasonable to expect Bo Nix to look better than he has in any game save for maybe Tampa. And we got that. 206 yards on 70% completion percentage, 2 touchdowns through the air, another rushing touchdown. But did you notice that the majority of Bo Nix's production through the air came after that game was basically decided? I said this in the last segment. Once the Raiders brought in Aiden O'Connell, that was a wrap. Game was over. That was Antonio Pierce saying, I can't stand to watch Gardner Minshew play quarterback anymore. They were done. They were not coming back in that game, bringing Aiden O'Connell off the bench. But only then was Bo Nix allowed to throw the ball downfield, and I use the word allowed intentionally. So, even then, when Aiden O'Connell came in, that's when it seemed like Sean Payton was willing to let Bo Nix throw the ball downfield and not a drive earlier. Because after that drive, because right after that punt, out comes Aiden O'Connell. But after that punt, of course, they dust up on the sideline. Here's Sean Payton's side of the story.
Last year, all of a sudden, there's still a little bit of Ferris Bueller in this player that we got to get rid of. All right, talking about Bo, and I love him to death. And so sometimes it's my love language.
First of all, and he explained it, Ferris Bueller kind of likes to do his own thing. Is that like a normal reference? Am I missing something? Like, I've seen the movie. I feel like I grasp what Ferris Bueller is as a movie character. That before he fully explained it, I was like, what? What does that have to do with anything? Bo Nix apparently has seen the movie, but does have a different account of the events.
He turned and looked at me and said, I love you. And I turned and said, I love you back.
Bo Nix, comedian. So essentially if I'm getting this straight, and please correct me if I'm wrong, 719-247-1313. Sean Payton was upset at Bo Nix because he audibled out of a running play to a pass play that if Troy Franklin had surer hands, would have gone for a 45-yard kill shot to the Raiders. You're lecturing him on this. No wonder Bo Nix got as heated. Are you kidding me? I nearly hit a 45-yard bomb that would have been curtains for our opponent. It would have been a massive play, the best play of my career. And I'm coming over the sideline and you're going to get on me because I audibled out of a run play? I know Sean Payton loves Bo Nix. We all know he loves Bo Nix. That is not in question here. He loves him so much, he's smothering him. These are currently the three situations in which I have found that Sean Payton feels it's okay to let Bo Nix throw the ball down the field. One, he scripts it, like in the Tampa game. Two, he has no other choice because the run game's not working. Or three, when it doesn't hurt the Broncos if he throws a pick. When the consequence of Bo Nix's actions are not dire to the Denver Broncos. And on that drive, because it was before Aiden O'Connell came in, Sean Payton still felt like the game was in the balance. And he wanted to do it his way. The struggle internally for Sean Payton right now between winning football games, what he thinks will win football games, what is his recipe for winning football games, right? The best years of Sean Payton's offense are when he gets a lot of production out of the running backs. So that's what he wants to do. But to a point, that is not helpful for Bo Nix's development. And I think there is a legitimate internal struggle with Sean Payton right now. Because you should not be getting on your quarterback that he nearly hit a 45-yard touchdown. I don't care if that was a play call or not. That in and of itself is growth from Bo Nix, who a couple of weeks ago we weren't even sure was reading NFL defenses. And now he does to audible out of a play, and he nearly hits it for 45 yards. Troy Franklin was wide open as wide open gets. And you're gonna get on the guy? Part of the growth of a quarterback is you have to let him fail. And I get it. It sounds weird. The Broncos are winning games. Why would they want to jeopardize that? Because there's a bigger picture here. There's a bigger picture, and it's Bo Nix. And if you're going to micromanage this guy to the point where he's never put in a position where he throws down the field with something on the line, guess what? You're going to be forced into that situation, and it's going to be in a game that means a lot to the Denver Broncos, and shockingly, he won't come through. You have to work through the mistakes, and I don't think Sean Payton wants to do that right now. I don't know if it's a quarter pole October thing that he wants to get out to a certain start till he's satisfied with the win-loss record, and then he's going to let Bo Nix go at the risk of him turning it over. I don't know what is going on Sean Payton's head. And none of this is him being anti-Bo Nix. It's a guy that has yet to develop a rookie quarterback in his career. I think he's still trying to figure out how to do it properly. There will need to come a point this season and probably next week that he's got to let Bo Nix make the throws that he was making late in the game in the middle of the game. There's a lot of game between the first 15 scripted plays, 15 or 20, and the game being out of reach. Right? And that's where Bo Nix has been able to live in those two situations for every game except week 1. Every game since. It's beginning of the game if I script it, and it's when the game's already decided. There's a lot of football in between those two spots, and Bo Nix has got to be allowed to make mistakes in that part of the game. It's a different conversation than it was in week one. Yeah, week one, he shouldn't throw the ball 40 plus times. It was his first NFL game, or his first regular season NFL game. We're a month later. It's got to let Bo Nix try those kind of throws when the game is on the line, and not just when the game's decided or when Sean Payton scripts it out. And I get it. He wants to run the ball. They were running the ball. Bo Nix saw something, audibled correctly, had a huge touchdown pass. Wasn't his fault Troy Franklin dropped it. And that's what Bo Nix is arguing. Like, come on, you got me throwing passes where I'm averaging 2.5 yards of completion here. And I see something that could give us a huge play. I nearly hit it. And you're upset with me? You're lecturing me? Bo Nix was right to go back at Sean Payton. Maybe he didn't need to be as demonstrative because obviously those questions would follow given how upset he got. So maybe he was a little bit too far one way. But I'm glad Bo Nix went back at him, and Sean Payton respects that. And of course, last year with Russell Wilson gets brought up. That's what everybody, including myself, was hoping that Russell Wilson did. I'm not Russell Wilson's biggest fan. But if a coach is chastising you, berating you on the sideline like that, you go back at him. You're both adults. Okay? You could still respect somebody and respect the coach-player relationship and be able to get into a disagreement. And Russell Wilson just stood there and took it. And maybe this is four-dimensional chess on Sean Payton's part. Maybe he looked at that moment like he did when he got on Russell Wilson last year. Maybe he was looking for the fire from Russell Wilson. The compete level. The ability to challenge him on an intellectual level about what they should be doing offensively. Maybe he was trying to do that at Bo. And if that's the case, then he got what he wanted. Or at least he should be what he wanted. Yeah, Russell Wilson should have went back at Sean Payton. You don't have to stand there and take that. I don't know who are these people arguing that Russell Wilson should have just stood there. Yeah, I get it. It's not a great look for a quarterback to be yelling at his coach. And that's why the questions come up. But what Bo Nix showed was that what Russell Wilson didn't last year. Bo Nix knew what he did was right. And I hope that Sean Payton knows that and is just trying to challenge him, to get that out of him. Maybe. I don't think he'll ever say it. Didn't have to be as demonstrative, as emotional as he was. But it is pretty ridiculous that that was the sequence and Bo Nix is being lectured about it. But it's time. It's time. Let him off the leash. Let him out of the box. Stop smothering him. Stop micromanaging. Whatever, however you want to describe what Sean Payton is doing with Bo Nix, it needs to end. Okay, I'm not saying completely abandon who you are. They want to run the football. They ran the football against the Jets. They ran the football against the Raiders successfully. That's good. That's the most important thing. But if you're going to throw the ball, throw the ball. Let him throw the ball. Don't do a passing game that's essentially a run game. Let him do more. Every time, look at the Jets game. Didn't do anything for the vast majority of that game. Weather let up, boom. 2 big throws to Cortland Sutton, won the Broncos the game. He's showing things. Tampa, the Jets game yesterday, he's showing things that he's ready. He's ready for more. And if this team's ultimately going to get to where they want to go, it's not going to be 3 yards in a cloud of dust and a great defense. There are too many other really good teams that are more well-balanced. Yeah, I'm going to say it. Let Bo cook. That's what I'm saying. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, Sunday was fun, but Saturday, my goodness. What is going on with college football? I'll tell you next on Extra Sports 1300. So I was told that this weekend in college football was supposed to be quite garbage. That's what I was told. This week is the big week in college football. This past weekend was supposed to be a snooze fest. Well, it was not a snooze fest. Vanderbilt took down Alabama, which, by the way, I don't know why they moved Alabama up to number 1. Texas should have stayed there last week, but whatever. Arkansas knocked off number 4 Tennessee. Florida squeaks by Cal. I have some thoughts on that coming up. Texas A&M ranked 25th, takes down number 9 Missouri. Doesn't just take them down, they mollywop them 41-10. Washington, about the only upset I called this weekend in my picks that I do with the guys at Cat Country. Washington beating number 10 Michigan. Minnesota took down USC, and now they're back to firing Lincoln Riley. And even mild upset, SMU beating number 22 Louisville. This weekend was fantastic. But you know why we're getting a weekend like this. NIL, portal, conference realignment. That's why we're getting these. Best on best. Big time teams taking on other big time teams. You got these other teams, not that Vanderbilt's a big time team, but transfer portal, they get this quarterback from New Mexico State. They get a couple other players from New Mexico State. They get a guy from TCU, and all of a sudden they're equipped to beat Alabama. Unthinkable. Just a year ago. In fact, Nick Saban said it last week. Every place is difficult in the SEC to play except Vanderbilt. It wasn't the power of friendship or the motivate bulletin board material from Nick Saban that helped Vanderbilt win. It's the current state of college football. And I'm not saying that the good of what we're seeing extends beyond just the product on television, because it doesn't. There's obviously a lot when it comes to other sports and athletes at other institutions that it's not good. But I said when all of this stuff went down, it's going to lead to a better product. It's going to be more NFL-like. And even though people don't want to lose the identity of college football, right? They don't want to lose the rivalries. They don't want to lose the buy-in, the buy-in with the team, right? Like, it's not about the player, it's about the institution, and the names keep changing, but all that kind of stuff. And I get that. And maybe that's tradition is going to be one thing that will be negatively impacted by all this if it hasn't already. But when it comes to the product that is being put out on Saturdays, the parity, the unpredictability, the chance that these schools have to actually knock off some of the best teams. I know this weekend was an exaggerated example of it. We're not going to see number 1, number 4, number 9, and almost number 8 go down in one weekend. But all these changes to college football are making for a better product in this regard. Is it outweighing all the negative? Probably not. Probably not. It is still a lawless wasteland out there. And had the story of the UNLV player, we still don't know exactly what happened there. It's not a perfect system. In fact, it's incredibly flawed, and it's greatly impacting people in a negative way. But if you just take the product on your television, it's better. It's already better, and it's going to keep getting better. Today, this new system where the schools would pay the players cleared its first hurdle. There are more hurdles, but the first one is cleared. It was Judge Claudia Wilkin granted preliminary approval to the terms of an industry-changing antitrust settlement Monday morning, accepting a series of changes made by attorneys representing all D1 athletes, the NCAA, and its Power 5 conferences. That from ESPN today. Its parity will exist even more under the system that we're heading towards. Now, don't get me wrong. Ohio State beat Iowa 35-7. Don't worry, there are still halves. There are still going to be programs that will be head and shoulders above everyone else. There's still, we go Ohio State, Texas, maybe Oregon. We'll see how Oregon matches up with Ohio State. I still believe in Alabama, despite their loss. Georgia's still really good. Like, there's still going to be a ruling class of college football. There will still be an elite level of team that the Vanderbilts, the Arkansas, the Cals, the Minnesotas will never be able to get to. Never. There will still be haves and have-nots. It'll be like the NFL. Right? What's the NFL? You got about, and I know I'm saying this after the Niners lost to the Cardinals, but for the last few years, you've had the Niners, you've had the Chiefs, you've had other teams like Buffalo and Baltimore who have routinely been part of the elite group of NFL teams, and everybody else can't get to that level. Except in a one-off kind of situation. But you have these nice little surprises along the way. You have a Minnesota Vikings. You have the Denver Broncos, winners of 3 straight. Like, you'll have some of this. And when we get to the college football playoff, there will be about 3 or 4 teams that you're like, these guys are better than everybody else. But everything beneath that is going to be wild. And that's awesome. I'm not saying that's why they implemented the playoff the way it is. It's to give them more spots, them being the Big Ten and the SEC, and for them to make more money. We know that. But the byproduct is a better product for you and I. And the Big 12, as CU gets ready to take on Kansas State in a massive football game this weekend, the Big 12 is a microcosm of it. I think Iowa State's really good. Everyone outside of that, I don't really know. The ruling class of college football does not currently reside in the Big 12. We know that. It was fantastic this weekend. As for the upset that was not, it is remarkable how Cam Ward and the ACC video replay official will not let Miami lose. Remarkable performances over the past 2 weeks for those two people. I don't, and I'm saying it tongue in cheek. I don't want to detract from Cam Ward because Cam Ward has been fantastic. He was unbelievable in that second half against Cal. While other Heisman candidates like Jaden Milroe took a step back this weekend with no Travis Hunter in action, Cam Ward kept up his candidacy for the Heisman. But 2 weeks in a row now, we have this with the video replay official in the ACC, and I don't even know if it's the same dude or if it's even a dude. That should have been targeting. That absolutely should have been targeting. Game over. And then the previous week, there was no indisputable evidence to turn that pass in the end zone to reverse that call. There's no indisputable video evidence. And it drives me nuts that they're not living by their rules. Indisputable video evidence. It doesn't take long to see that. I'm not saying the fix is in. I just I would much rather chalk it up to ineptitude than I would to say some nefarious plan is in place to make sure Miami stays undefeated. Okay, but that's 2 weeks now that the video replay official messed up in a Miami game. It's quite the coincidence. But I don't want that to detract from Cam Ward because Cam Ward still had to do what he did. How awesome was all that with Cal? With all the jokes about Cal and woke and it was good. That was fun. And see, that wouldn't even be possible if Cal hadn't gone to the ACC. So see, Cal and Stanford in the ACC is great for college football. Forget how much it costs to send a team clear of like 50 some odd players and a traveling party of 100 clear across the country. And the fact that that game was being played at very late on a Saturday night in Miami. Like, so what? We got cool signs on College Game Day. My favorite was the only lines I do are code. That was my favorite one. 719-247-1313. College football on a national level, pretty awesome this weekend. College football on a local level, not so much. We'll talk about Air Force, but there was something good out of the weekend for Air Force athletics, and it was on the ice. Talk about it next. Air Force picked a bad year to not be up to their normal level or what we expect to be normal given what they have been over the last few years. They picked the worst year to do it because while they are down, their service academy rivals are as up as they have ever been. If anything should happen, if Boise State should stumble at any point, in the way Ashton Genty's running the football, I don't know that they will. But if they stumble, it is entirely possible that a service academy gets into the college football playoff. Army and Navy are very good. And we'll see what happens when Air Force takes on Army in a few weeks. But Air Force wasn't nearly up to the task of taking on that Navy team. And I think Army is better than Navy. And it's tough, right? It's tough when the season has gone the way it has, and then you get to the Commander-in-Chief's games, and then it's a blowout, and that's it. Right? Not even that three-way tie thing is going to help out Air Force because they need to win this thing outright. It's tough. And I thought that we were going to see a change at quarterback for Wyoming. And we didn't. I thought Quentin Hayes would be out there in Laramie. He was not. But he ends up playing, and I thought he gave Air Force a little bit of a spark. I mean, there was very little that was going to nothing. There was nothing that could have been done to avoid the fate that befell them on Saturday. Maybe you say, hey, if Quentin Hayes gets more run in the Wyoming game, maybe he's more, I don't know. I just think every week I'm like, well, maybe if they, and I think it's just getting to the point that this is a down year for Air Force and a seriously down year. Like not just a couple of wins off the pace they've set over the last few. Like this is a rebuilding year. And so that leads me to say, all right, Quentin Hayes didn't come in against Wyoming. And look, he didn't run the ball that effectively. And obviously that's something you would very much like to see out of an Air Force quarterback, but he threw the ball. The way this season is going, obviously I already thought this 2 weeks ago that maybe a change at quarterback, but I mean, if you're a rebuilding team, you look to your underclassmen. How many of these guys would you be better off next year and moving forward if you got them more game time? You hate for that opportunity to be taken away from seniors who are playing their last collegiate football games over the next few weeks, but I don't know. I think there has to be a question of whether you take a big picture view and say, if we got guys that are second on the depth chart that we're going to have more time with, maybe we start now. And maybe that starts at the quarterback position. Because they're running out of things they can accomplish this year. They're getting further behind in the Mountain West. They're losing out on the Commander-in-Chief's trophy, and pretty soon even bowl eligibility is going to be maybe not something that's going to happen, which would be the most unthinkable out of everything. But maybe that's why you stay in it. Maybe that's why you don't look to the younger players. Maybe you try to go with the guys you went into the year with, hoping that they can grind out some wins and get you there, because the risk of playing young players, inexperienced and young, is that there's a risk it could be even worse. Will be interesting to see over the next few weeks how Air Force handles these games coming up, because Saturday was a big blow to morale. But it happens, and in some ways it almost makes you appreciate what you've seen for the last 4 or 5 years even more. Because what it is now, has been this year, is kind of what it should be, right? No transfer portal, no NIL. It's a service academy. A service academy routinely winning 9-10 games, beating Power 5 teams in bowl games. Like, that's not what's supposed to happen. But yet it did, year after year after year. But Air Force falling to Navy on Saturday. And the weekend didn't start that well for Air Force hockey either, starting off their season against Arizona State. Clearly, I am the problem, and I will accept that. And I've told the folks at Altitude, if you want what's best for Air Force, you do not want my bad juju in the building. Because they lose 8-1 on Friday to Arizona State, who looks like an absolute wagon. And then the very next night, they beat them in overtime. College hockey, in a nutshell. The idea of momentum, that one game affects it. Nope, doesn't do that. But to go from 8-1 on Friday to winning in overtime, and by the way, they fell behind by multiple goals early in that hockey game on Saturday. And Frank Serratore, the head coach of the Falcons, even was kidding around with Jay Ritchie on these airwaves after the game. Is like, when they went up 2-0, what did you think was going to happen? What was going through your head? Jay, to his credit, played it the right way, did not say what he was thinking. But it was Frank acknowledging, like, if people were watching that game or listening to that game and went, here we go again, how could you blame them? And yet, by the end of the night, Air Force had a thrilling overtime win. And has Guy Blessing, their goaltender, and Clayton Constantino named to the AHA Team of the Week. That's how good the performance was on Saturday. Not to say I was expecting Saturday at all, because I wasn't. So call me a naysayer, call me what you want. I did not expect Air Force to bounce back like that. And I hold this hockey team in very high regard. I believe in them. But given what I saw on Friday night, I did not think a win like that on Saturday was in the cards. But this is kind of what Air Force hockey is. They schedule this murder's row of teams in the non-conference. And they did this last year with Michigan State. Split that series. Same thing. Like, you just, I don't know if the record in the non-conference is going to be great for Air Force once all is said and done. They're going to be taking on Minnesota, and then they'll either have UMass or Omaha on Saturday in the icebreaker. And that's a prestigious tournament. They're not inviting the worst teams in college hockey to compete in that. I don't know how good the non-conference is going to be. They got CC twice in the non-conference. CC stacked. I think they're 11th right now. Watch them be in the top 10 in no time at all. I think the Tigers could push for the top 5 by the time the season's over. Air Force has got to play them twice. I don't know how good the record's going to be after the non-conference, but I know the bigger plan here because I've seen it for years. This team goes through it in the non-conference. They have a couple of the wins like they have on Saturday where you go, okay, this team is capable. And they're morale boosting and their confidence building. And then they head into the holiday break. They come out in January and then they make a run. It just happens all too often for me to not believe it's going to happen this year. But if you told me that morale boosting, that confidence boosting win would come 24 hours after being beaten 8-1, giving up 3 shorthanded goals, no, I would not. I would not have had that. But credit to them. What a win. It's even, I mean, it makes it even a better. If you beat the 20th ranked team in the country, that's a huge win. Right? If you beat the 20th ranked team in the country after falling behind 2-0, after losing the previous night 8-1, they were outscored 10-1 in the first 65 to 70 minutes of hockey of their season. And yet they still come away with the win. That win's made even better by what happened the night before. Not that anyone would sign up for what happened the night before, but and they did it in the Air Power Legacy series. I called a soccer match the other night when Air Force men's soccer was wearing their version of those jerseys. They lost. Then Air Force football was obviously wearing them against Navy. That game went how it went. Then Air Force hockey wore them the second night against Arizona State. And that's like the equivalent to if the Broncos would have lost yesterday. What would happen to the throwbacks? What would people be saying about the throwbacks? If you're going to go with an alternate look, if you're going to go with throwbacks, you want the win. Or else you're like, put them away. Never take them out again. Could you imagine if they got blown out yesterday by the Raiders in those uniforms? The discourse. So good that Air Force hockey was able to get one. And no, their uniform. As good as the football uniforms are, the hockey uniforms level. Same level. So good. Look good, played good, and they get a win. You'll hear more on the weekend's events tonight on the Frank Serratori Show. Special night. They got to head to Vegas tomorrow. So they're doing the show tonight. Jay Ritchie will be hosting coming up at 6 o'clock. And if you are wondering about the football, yes, as soon as that show is over, we will go to Saints and Chiefs here on Extra Sports 1300. Speaking of, Line for tonight, Kansas City minus 5.5. Thinking New Orleans. Thinking New Orleans at a 5.5 line. Whatever way you would like to bet, know that either side of that line will be a minus 110 split. And when you bet on Circa Sports Colorado app, which is where I'm finding that line, know that a lot of the games that you are going to be betting on will be a minus 110 split because they strive to do that. Other sports books that may invite you in with these free bet offers, they're going to take it back from you little by little by going minus 115, $1.20 to get in on some of these games. With Circa Sports Colorado, their lines are their promos. And if you're looking at large market bets, hockey season starting up actually tomorrow, Colorado on Wednesday, just know that they keep as low money as possible on those large market bets like futures. It all adds up to just a better experience. That's what they're striving for. And they encourage you, shop around, compare to what you have. I did that, and now I just have Circa Sports Colorado. That's it. Download the app today. Must be 21 years or older and present in Colorado to bet. If you have a gambling problem, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. The 3 stories that are driving the show, all Broncos. Next. Hello there. Drive Time Sports on this Monday, a football Monday, which means it's time to report for game day at Hooters of Colorado Springs. Tonight, catch the fan filler, 10 boneless wings, fries, a dressing, and a drink for only $16.59. Get into Hooters of Colorado Springs for all the football action. Going to hit the three stories that are driving the show momentarily. But I want you to have the means of communication. 719-247-1313. Text, call. You can also find me on social media at Gingerly Tweets on X, at Kaufman Sports, Instagram, Threads. If you pull me over to Threads, may do that. I'm not on Threads a lot. I do have the Threads. Plenty of ways to interact with the show, and I strongly encourage you to do so. Now, here are the three stories that are driving the show. All right, story number one, of course. Well, all three stories are about one game. Here's story number one.
Minshew with a play fake, rolling to his left. Now floats one too high. It's going to be intercepted at the goal line. Down the west sideline, intercepted. This is past Surtain. Surtain's going to house call it. 25-20, 15-10, 5 touchdown. And the Broncos on a 100-yard interception return for a touchdown are 1 point away from tying this game.
KOA on the call for the first time in 9 tries. The Denver Broncos have knocked off the Las Vegas Raiders. Pat Surtain's 100-yard pick six was the thing that swung that game in their favor. And it could be the uniforms that added to the vibes. I think it was more who they were playing and who they beat and how long it's been since they've beaten them. Feels a bit different yesterday as opposed to when the Broncos ended their losing streak against the Chiefs. Because I think with the beating the Chiefs, it's like good that that's over, right? No more losing streak. But the reality remained that the Chiefs are at a certain level and the Broncos are not nearly there yet. With the Raiders, it feels different because this was a team that is always lumped in with the Broncos. They're always considered about the same level, and the Broncos couldn't beat them. So if they couldn't beat them, who could they beat? And not only by beating them, but by whooping them, I think it added to it. And I think that this team reminds me of the 2016-17 Denver Nuggets. That Nuggets team was under a head coach in Michael Malone that was in his second year. They had a star in Nikola Jokic, or somebody reaching stardom in Nikola Jokic. Same thing is happening with Pat Surtain. They had a rookie that their hopes of being something special hinged on. Jamal Murray with that Nuggets team, Bo Nix with this Broncos team. But more than anything else, it's an identity. It's a direction. That's what that Nuggets team found. They made the change the year prior to move off of Nurkic and go to Jokic. Nurkic was still around, but they made Nikola Jokic their focal point. And they did it for an entire season. And they improved by, I think, 7 wins. And Nikola Jokic's numbers went up. and the team was playing better and winning more, and people were starting to buy back in. People were starting to have fun with the Denver Nuggets again after some brutal years under Brian Shaw. This Broncos team has their identity, has their direction. They are the closest thing to the Pittsburgh Steelers we got in this league. They are a defense-first team. The defense is the best thing about them. They rely on their defense to keep them in games and to wreck games if they can, as they did yesterday. And then the offense is a little bit of a work in progress. But this is the Broncos' identity, and it starts with that defense. Until Bo Nix figures it out, until Sean Payton has this offense humming at the level that he wants it to, it's going to be the defense. It's going to continue to be the defense. That's going to be the main story and how the Denver Broncos win. It's their identity. And there's no reason that will change, even if Bo Nix improves. We're still talking, okay, second-year quarterback, third-year quarterback. It's more of a process, but this Broncos team has found their identity. They have a star. They have a rookie that's making you think maybe they have something. A lot of parallels. And look, that Nuggets team finished 10 games under 500. They lost the next year in game 82 to the Wolves. They didn't make the playoffs for 2 years after that. And it may be the same path. The Broncos may not sniff the postseason this year. They may not even make it next year. This is not a all aboard the Broncos playoff train, but this is a team that knows what they are for the most part, knows what their strengths are, has an identity, has a star, has a young rookie that is intriguing. A lot of similarities, a lot of parallels. And we'll see if it takes this Broncos team as long to make the postseason. More on... actually, let me go to this for story number 2. We'll get back to Pat Surtain. Here's Sean Payton on his little discussion with Bo Nix on the sideline.
Last year, all of a sudden, it's just, there's still a little bit of Ferris Bueller in this player that we got to get rid of. All right. Talking about Bo, and I love him to death. And so sometimes it's my love language.
That little disagreement was after Bo Nix audibled out of a run play. And if Troy Franklin caught the ball and it wasn't like he shouldn't have, it would have been a 45-yard touchdown. The best play of Bo Nix's career. He called it. Bo Nix called it. He audibled. That is a huge sign of progression and maturation and reading defenses. And Sean Payton is getting on him on the sideline. I'm with Bo Nix here. And I think that's what he was telling him. Did he have to be that demonstrative? No, it's not a great look. It wasn't a great look when Travis Kelce went in on Andy Reid in the Super Bowl. It's certainly not a great look that Bo Nix went in on Sean Payton on the sideline. But the idea behind it, the emotion behind it is the right one. Sean Payton loves Bo Nix, but he loves him so much he's smothering him. Why is Bo Nix only allowed to throw the football downfield when it's one of the scripted plays at the beginning of the game like Tampa, or when the game is out of reach and your opponent has waved the white flag by bringing in Aiden O'Connell, that Bo Nix gets to throw. I think right now Sean Payton is having a hard time, and I think this has been the case for most of the season so far, but it really showed through yesterday. I think there is an internal conflict between Sean Payton's desire to win football games, which is not to let the rookie air it out, which is to run the football, be conservative offensively, make the timely play to win you the game, lean on your defense, and what is best for Bo Nix's development. I mean, even as much as that game last week with the Jets was, you don't know how much you could take out of it. Bo Nix, when he needed to, hit 2 big throws. Right? And it didn't seem like it earned him any more trust to make plays when the game was still in the balance. And I think that has to change, because it's all well and good that the Broncos are winning football games. And I'm not saying you have to completely abandon your identity in order to let Bo air it out. But you got to let him make some of those throws that he made at the end of the game, in the middle of the game. You got to. And yes, it could at some point cost the Broncos a game. Can't lose the plot here. It's about Bo Nix's development first and foremost. And if he's going to smother this guy to the point where he's never in a position anymore where he can make a consequential throw, then their Broncos are going to be forced into it. And it's going to be the worst possible time. And Bo Nix may not be ready for that. Yes, let him cook. That's what I'm saying. It's time. He's shown enough. Let's get back to Pat Surtain, story number 3.
We felt like we needed that momentum moving forward. Obviously, we was in a situation where we had to capitalize on the opportunities we could get. And that situation there, I had to capitalize on that moment and make a play. And I could just feel the momentum shift, You could tell by the team that that playing so far moving forward, we really, really felt the tempo, felt the urgency to really up the energy and up the play for real. So
that was Pat Surtain, of course, talking about his 100-yard pick six that changed the game. But changing the game from the defensive side of things is what wins you Defensive Player of the Year. Wrecking games is what wins you Defensive Player of the Year. And now Pat Surtain is being discussed as a candidate for Defensive Player of the Year and is turning into an NFL star with what he has done through the first 5 games of this season. And he absolutely should be in that conversation, but it will be very difficult for him to win. Since the year 2000, only 2 corners have won Defensive Player of the Year. Stephon Gilmore in 2019, Charles Woodson in 2009. What do they have in common? A few things. 1, they led the league in interceptions. 2, they were on football teams that won and very good to elite defenses. I don't know how many of those boxes Pat Surtain is going to be able to check as the season goes on. But if he keeps following these number 1 receivers, and yesterday was kind of off for that because without Devontae Adams, the Raiders didn't really have a number 1 wide receiver or an elite wide receiver that you felt like you had to put Surtain on him. If he stays shadowing these number 1 receivers, he's going to have a chance to lead the league in interceptions. I don't know if he will, but he has that chance. The Broncos defense, I don't think is going to fall apart. I think it's the most real thing about this football team, and I think they're going to continue to play defense at a pretty high level for the rest of the year. But are the Broncos going to win enough games to keep Pat Surtain in this conversation? Because it's going to move to TJ Watt. It's going to move to any number of pass rushers, because that's where people look. But just the fact that he's in that conversation tells you how much this guy has reached stardom in the first 5 games this year. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the 3 stories that are driving the show, or any other sports-related topic you would like to get into. Drive Time Sports continuing next on Extra Sports 1300. Interesting weekend of football. Talked earlier about college football and how chaotic that was. I don't know that our NFL Sunday was chaotic, but there were a few things that I noticed outside of the Broncos Raiders game. Perhaps what adds to the elation with Broncos fans, excuse me, today is that they are now off the hook as being the organization that has made the absolute worst decision at quarterback in the history of football. Maybe that's a bit too much. Worst quarterback trade, worst contract. That belongs to the Cleveland Browns. They did that. And I've always felt like if Deshaun Watson doesn't hit, that's so much worse than what the Broncos did with Russell Wilson. Yesterday was the second time that he's had a quarterback rating in single digits. And here's, if even without the off the field stuff, which I know is a major part of it. And one thing that you could say in Russell Wilson's defense, nothing he did in Denver was that, or Seattle, right? But even taking that away, at least the Broncos could and did eat his salary and moved off of him. I don't know what the Browns are supposed to do. If they try to do the same thing that the Denver Broncos did with Russell Wilson, it will take up 75% of their cap. I don't know what Russell Wilson's at, 30, 40? 75%. And I heard people say that is an untradeable, uncuttable, all that. And I was like, yeah, right. I just saw the Broncos do it. Anybody can do it. Now I'm starting to find out it literally, they can't. Unless they would really like to start saying goodbye to some very significant players. It is really bad in Cleveland, and I don't care how many of their offensive linemen are banged up. Deshaun Watson is better, should be better than an 8-point-something quarterback rating. I wasn't the biggest believer in Baker Mayfield, but boy, oh boy, did they sell their souls to try and get an upgrade at quarterback. I mean, what? You just going to have him sit there with Jameis Winston? It was already going to be awkward for Russell Wilson to be standing on the Broncos sideline benched. And now Deshaun Watson for what? The next 2 years, 3 years? I don't know how long the Browns have to wait before they can legitimately move off of Deshaun Watson before they torpedo their entire organization. And he's just going to be sitting there? This is not arguing that they shouldn't go to Jameis Winston. I'm just saying how can you just have Deshaun Watson sit there? But I don't know what Cleveland does. And you feel terrible because it's arguably the NFL's best fan base, and they're being put through this. It's a pretty good team. Look what Joe Flacco did with them. That was atrocious. Maybe only equaled with the decisions made at the end of the Buffalo Bills game. And what happened at the end of that game, where the Buffalo Bills didn't take what was available to them, which is just running out the clock, backed up. Even Josh Allen was not getting the Buffalo Bills downfield. I'm sorry, he wasn't. They didn't have the field position to do it. And you empty it, you go you empty the backfield, you don't even put up you don't even put the idea in Houston's heads that you might run the football. You're like, no, we're passing. And you give Houston a short field where it took CJ Stroud all of like 10 seconds to get in field goal range. I don't know if the Bills win it in overtime, but they certainly weren't going to win it in regulation, not sitting where they were. And for Joe Brady to decide to do that and for Sean McDermott to give that the okay, unconscionable. And that was the game that the Bills needed. And given what happened against Baltimore the week before, as quickly as everybody jumped back on the Bills bandwagon, they're trying to jump off of it. They look like world beaters for the first 3 weeks. And you get thumped by Baltimore. And you get beaten by Houston. And you embarrass yourself with your inability to manage the game properly. I don't know what to think of Buffalo. I think they're good. With Josh Allen there, gets them pretty far, but I don't know what to make of this football team now. And it just goes to show you gotta have coach, quarterback. You gotta have both. And those gotta be in lockstep, or play caller, right? The guy calling the plays, the quarterback executing the plays. It has to be right. How many teams win championships without that? You don't have to have the best quarterback. You don't have to have the best play caller / coach. But it's so out of whack, and it's not like we haven't seen this before from the Buffalo Bills coaching staff and their inability to manage a game properly. I think the Bills are good. Because I'm even more down on the Jets after what I saw in London. And Miami feels like they're in a pit of despair right now that they're never going to climb out of, even if Tua comes back. It is so bad the way Miami looks right now. But Houston's a good team. So losing to them is not, if they would have lost to them in overtime, that's not a bad loss. But because of the way they manage it, you're like, and 12 men on the field against Denver, the squib kick, like all this kind of stuff. It's like every once in a while it pops up and you're like, I don't know if they're ever going to win a Super Bowl with Sean McDermott as their head coach. But Buffalo's still good. Buffalo's good. Baltimore's good. I think Cincinnati's still good. There's a good team in there. They're better than their record says they are. We're not to the point where you are what your record says you are. Fluky things have happened. We're still too early. You're not what your record says you are yet. Cincinnati's better. But At some point, you just got to write them off and be like, that's it. They're not coming back. And then the less I say about last night's football game, the better. Oh, boy. But I will say this. Pittsburgh should stick with Justin Fields. Not a pretty game last night. Not aesthetically pleasing. Ran very late into the evening on the same day where we had one of these London kickoffs. Gotta stick with Justin Fields. I'll say that. But that was not a quality football contest last night in prime time. No siree. 719-247-1313. Take some of your thoughts on the other side of the break. Don't forget Frank Serratori show at the top of the hour discussing that amazing bounce back win over 20th ranked ASU on Saturday. In the meantime, more Drive Time Sports. In the meantime, I want to tell you that you can now use Tomorrow, did I see? I totally missed the games in Finland or wherever they were over the weekend between the Sabres and Devils. Not that I would put either of those two teams at the top of my watch list, but it was NHL hockey, so probably should have tuned in. A lot going on. But tomorrow afternoon, there will be hockey. And Wednesday night, Avs open the season against the Vegas Golden Knights. It's getting better. Getting better, adding the Avs back into the mix. We'll talk more about them, set you up for the season coming up in the next couple of days, because we have those at our disposal. Take a couple of your texts here. 719-247-1313. I pointed out December 29th as an important date in Pat Surtain's Defensive Player of the Year candidacy, because that's the next time he will probably be locked up with a truly elite receiver. And as long as he keeps doing what he's doing, and the Broncos win enough, that could mean a lot going up against Jamar Chase. Albert points out, and I don't think he's off base there, by the time the Broncos play the Bengals, it will be irrelevant. Jamar Chase will probably be suffering from some, quote, hamstring soft tissue injury to protect himself from real injury due to his contract negotiations. Maybe. It's entirely possible. But the point is, it's I would not jump in on the Pat Surtain Defensive Player of the Year market just yet. But a star is being born in Denver, and a kind of folk hero just so happens to be playing opposite him of Surtain in that secondary. Riley Moss comes up with an interception. And the legend of Riley Moss grows. And this dude, have you ever heard this dude talk? This dude is more confident than any human being. Like this dude, and I'll just say the position he plays and who he is, you got to be confident. Got to be confident. A lot of people will write you off. But yeah, Surtain's the main attraction there, but Macmillan, we got another Bronco that says we're pronouncing his name wrong. It's Macmillan, not McMillan. Riley Moss. They're doing pretty well too. And the white man can't jump Photoshops are just, every time I see it, I've seen it 100 times. I cackle every time. Every time. It's a good pick there from Riley Moss. They may have something in that guy. Steve G says, I think that most of the nonsense regarding Davante Adams is Davante's fault. You go to the Raiders and you think it's going to be better. Have you had a recent trip to Colorado? Oh, I get it. I get what you're saying. He thought he would be able to play with his buddy. That's what he thought. And once his buddy got traded, released, he kind of stuck with it. And then he had Jimmy G, and he hated that. And then they went to Gardner Minshew, and he hates that. And yeah, so Aaron Rodgers said something, and I don't like to give credit to that guy too much because he says a lot of ridiculous things. But even Aaron Rodgers made a really good point, like kind of pointed out what you're saying, Steve. It's like the grass is greener where you water it. I mean, he has to know it's Devontae Adams that he's talking about, but he's almost going like, whoa. Are you sure about that? You know, he wanted to leave Green Bay, had a good thing going. Look at what Green Bay's got now with Jordan Love for that atrocious interception yesterday, notwithstanding. And you want to go out, hang out with your buddy. So you're right. Some of this is Devontae's fault, but the credit I continue to give him is that he did not want out at the first sign of trouble. He has not been nearly as outspoken as Stephon Diggs, but he eventually ended up in the same place. Now, where will be a new place? Here's Adam Schefter on the latest with Devontae Adams.
Mark Davis is paying Devontae Adams $970,000, almost $1 million for each week he's not playing. I don't think Mark Davis wants to do that. So ideally, you'd like to get this resolved. There are questions with each that I think slow down the process a little in terms of who's absorbing all the financial responsibilities. Can you redo a contract with Devontae? Can the sides agree on compensation? All that could happen very quickly, or it could drag a little bit.
And I think it's going to drag on a little bit, but watching the Jets, I think they're still in on Devontae Adams and seem to be his most likely landing spot. I heard somebody, I forget who, but somebody talking about how maybe Woody Johnson wouldn't want to pay the freight for his contract if things are not going well. I don't know. It feels like the Jets are still all in, and there's no getting back after this, right? Whether you win or whether you don't, the Jets are still going to head into pretty lean years. So I kind of feel like, and I don't know if Devontae Adams is the answer to all that ails the New York Jets, but this is what all-in teams do. They make moves like this. They get better. I mean, how can you say they won't be better with Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams together again? Does he make them all of a sudden a Super Bowl contender? No, but I never fancied the Jets as that. We'll see, but a lot of teams yesterday showed that they could use a Devontae Adams. See where it goes. I feel like we're heading. I think Devontae gets traded, but I think he's going to hold up the market so much that maybe Amari Cooper, DeAndre Hopkins, those guys don't end up moving, and it's just Devontae Adams going somewhere. I heard Tom Pelissero guest hosting for Rich Eisen talking about maybe Cooper Kupp being on the block. NFL trade deadlines are always so disappointing. But it sure feels like Devontae Adams, one way or another, at some point, will be out of Vegas. Broncos could still use him, by the way. Just want to continue to get that out there. And thank you. In case you thought I changed my mind, I have not. I still think that the Broncos should be interested in his services. Who knows? Maybe this win has changed the perspective of the brain trust with the Broncos. And like, yeah, we got to go get this guy. Troy Franklin's dropping 45-yard touchdowns. Marvin Mims is a gadget player. They could use a Devontae Adams. I don't think Devontae Adams would want to go there. Nor do I think the Raiders will be in any mood to help out the Denver Broncos in their pursuit of being better. So we'll see. That will drag on. Tonight, Kansas City, New Orleans. Chiefs will be without Rashee Rice. Speaking of wide receivers. But the Saints are without like half their team. Their injury report is ridiculous. No Taysom Hill, which makes me, fantasy owner of Alvin Kamara, very happy. Never been a fan of Taysom Hill, and what he did to me last week, I did not appreciate. So if any New Orleans Saints are running in touchdowns, it will be Alvin Kamara tonight. I think it'll be close because that's just where the Chiefs live. Close games, probably win. But how close it is of note, certainly, of interest. Kansas City -5.5 is what you'll get on Circa Sports Colorado, and it will be a -110 split, whether you go New Orleans or whether you go Kansas City. They strive to be that -110 split as opposed to other sports books, which use -115, -120, a little bit more liberally. Circa Sports keeps as little money as possible on large market bets like futures and golf tournaments, and they don't limit players based on their winnings. You stack it all up, it's better for the better. That's what Circa Sports Colorado is all about. Download the app as I have. Compare, contrast with what you're currently using. That's how confident Circa Sports Colorado is that you will make it your app of choice, as I've made it mine. Download the Circa Sports Colorado app today. Must be 21 years or older and present in Colorado to bet. If you have a gambling problem, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. It has been my pleasure to serve you on this Monday. I'll have more on the Broncos win over the Raiders alongside Jessica Mendoza tonight, KKTV 11 at 10. And then we'll reconvene tomorrow at 3. Don't forget, coming up top of the hour, Air Force Hockey Coaches Show after a big bounce back win over ASU, and looking forward to the Icebreaker tournament this weekend in Vegas. And then as soon as that is over, we will be joining the Chiefs and Saints. So that's what we got lined up for you. Hope you enjoy it. Have a good day. Talk tomorrow.